Okay. All right. So we have so far Chairwoman Farrell.
You canceled the already.
We have, let's see, we have Joe Aiko, Joyce Love, Judy Doche, Tom Hoey, Owusu Anani, Richard Conti, Sonia Frederick, Trey Kingston, Alfredo Ballerin, the Treasurer Darius, Mike Wheeler, and David Galin in the meeting.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Thursday, May 14th Common Council meeting of the Finance, Assessment, and Taxation Committee. Our staff, John Rafael Pichardo, just read off the people who are here. And since he's able to see everyone, that will be the official record of everyone that's here. Thank you for coming. I think what we'll do first, that we'll deal with the bills that are on our list. And then we're expecting some people from the mayor's office to talk more about exactly what is happening. So let's begin with, did you say Councilmember Frederick is here?
Yes.
Okay, let's start with hers then. Local Law F, a local law amending chapter, local law F, I don't need to read it all. So Sonia, if you want to say a few words about it, and then we can, staff and Sonia, if you want to say a few words, and then we can go into any questions that people may have.
Yep, thank you, Jenny. So this is local law F of 2020 with a first-time homebuyers tax exemption for the city of Albany. As you all know, this is basically a reenactment of a sunset law that was previously upheld by previous councils. It did sunset in 2016, so I'm looking to bring it back as a way to incentivize some first-time homebuyers in our city, as well as to incentivize some construction in our city. So this law would allow for a 5-year property tax exemption for first-time homebuyers for any construction done on vacant lots. And essentially what would occur is it would be a 5-year tiered exemption. First year they get 50% exempt for the real property tax law, 40, 30, 20, 10, and then ultimately back down to normal. So it's a really great way to incentivize, and I do think we had, did you say Darius was on the line?
He is, yes, I can actually see Darius.
Perfect.
Hello.
Darius. I believe you provided a overview of what the net impact would be, and I believe it would be 0, given that this would actually encourage people to build homes, and it wouldn't have been pulling away from anything or any form of tax that you're already receiving. Is that correct?
That's correct. That's my view. I believe it's the assessor's view as well.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Right. And the last thing I'll say is it's under a certain threshold, so that we really encourage property to be built that is, you know, affordable and not looking at large dollar figures here. Does anybody have any questions?
Okay, seeing no questions, could I get a motion?
Judy has something. Judy has her hand,
great.
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, I can't see you. So JR, if you can tell me who has their hands up. I see Owusu with his hands up and he happens to be here. So I will let him ask his question, and then Judy, you're next.
Yeah, first off, just want to say thank you, Councilmember Frederick, for putting this legislation forward. My question is, and also maybe Darius can ask, is there a way we could expand this to abandoned vacant properties that individuals purchase for with these type of incentives?
I don't believe so under this law, under the state law that provides the basis for doing this. There are other incentives that are available. Trey could probably speak more on it, that are available for, and they're very similar to this. And it's actually very similar in the way that the IDA works as well, where you take a piece of property that is kind of dilapidated or whatever, and its value is, say, $100,000. You put in $500,000 worth of improvements, and the taxes are tiered upwards, starting from that $100,000 level up to the $500,000 level, $500,000 level over time. So there are other things, but not under. I don't believe that's permissible under this portion of the New York State real property statute.
Thank you.
Judy?
So I have a similar question. I thought that we had an incentive for first-time home buyers for existing properties also. Is there one like that? Why, if not, why are we not including an incentive for people to, first-time home buyers to buy in the city of Albany?
Trey?
Okay, so sorry, I wasn't sure if you were going to go. This section of law, it also includes substantial renovations. There's nothing in the real property tax law that doesn't have those two caveats in it for first-time home buyers. I think that there may be other programs that are existent, but it's not an exemption or a real property tax law thing. That's more through grants, and that's more under phase control. But as far as exemptions go, and just to go off of what Darius just said, there are other exemptions, but they are all rehabilitation based. This one happens to be new construction or substantial rehabilitation. There's no exemption per se, just to incentivize people to move into the city.
I would also say, I think the program that you may be thinking of, Councilwoman, I believe ended several years ago. Trey might be able to verify that. And it was not an exemption, but I think there was some sort of financial incentive for first-time home buyers in the city.
Yeah, I'm not familiar. That might predate me. That since I've been around in 2017, I haven't heard of any sort of thing.
Okay.
These youngsters.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was like the Midtown college area that there had been some targeting to encourage people to live in that area. So I don't, I guess the other question I have about this is, so this was in existence and it expired. So from a drafting standpoint, are we sure that we're amending it based upon what the current language is? Or did it just sort of become obsolete, disappear? Did it have some sort of sunset that so we're making sure?
Yes, yes, Councilwoman, it did sunset at some time. Our version, our code sunset, the state legislator then renewed it, and we haven't yet, in our code, we did not renew it. So it sunset in our version, but so what Councilwoman Frederick is doing is reauthorizing it again.
So if we're reauthorizing it, though, it looks like we're amending existing language. So my question is kind of like, did that sunset and disappear? It's a question I'm raising. I don't necessarily expect.
Are you asking like in terms of our sunset or the state sunset?
Our sunset.
Michelle, if you can scroll down more, it has the full sunset down more, so I can explain. Right here's the sunsets.
The language was still on the books.
Mm-hmm.
It was just with the sunset language, the old sunset language in there. Do we know why this sunsetted?
It's sunsetted because the state law sunsetted, so it's coinciding at the same time with the state law. We are only authorized to do this exemption if the state authorizes us to do it.
All right, thank you. I make a motion to pass this out of committee with a positive recommendation.
Excellent. Can I have a second?
I'll second.
All those in favor, and JR, do you mind reading off the committee members that say yes? Maybe just put your hand up if you're a committee member.
Sure. We have Councilman O'Brien.
I can't hear shit.
Is an affirmative. We have Councilwoman Duche. There's a lot of people in here, so it's taking me a minute. I see Councilmember Ballard in the affirmative as well. Michelle, is that everybody in the committee? I think there's more.
Yeah.
What about Farrell?
Robin,
Oh,
I voted
Okay,
yes.
yeah.
Is Councilmember Robinson here? I don't see him.
No, he's not in here. Not yet, at least.
Excellent.
So it passes with
So it
positive
passes.
recommendation. Yep.
Great.
Excellent.
Thank you for your support, JR, Trey, and Darius. Appreciate it.
Thanks for
Thank
doing.
you. This is a good law.
Next up, we have 44.41.20, an ordinance of the Common Council authorizing the sale to the Legal Aid Society of Northeastern New York of city-owned land at 69 Sherman Street. That tax map parcel was sent out along with the appraisal report. And this is Councilmember Love's, but I don't know if you want to say anything, Councilmember Love, or if you want to
No,
go to.
it's a lot. It's just a lot.
Yeah, there's not as much to talk about with
I mean, I already discussed it, I think, with Danita when they asked me to come aboard on it. So it was already discussed. I'm good.
Does anybody have any questions?
Yeah, if I could just make a comment.
Go ahead. We'll do Councilmember O'Brien and then Conti, you're next.
Yeah, I used to volunteer at Legal Aid quite a bit, and this is in back on Sherman Street, and they need it for parking, and it's been a vacant lot for a long time. So I would love to co-sponsor this along with Joyce, because it's for a good purpose.
Excellent. Councilmember Conti?
Yeah, just want to clarify that both these properties, the Sherman and Columbia one, are being sold at the appraised value, which is the number indicated in the supporting memos.
Excellent. Thank you for that.
That is correct.
Yes.
We have Councilmember Anani who has his hand up.
Councilmember Anani?
Yes, just a quick question. There was a staffer within the city that asked a question as it relates to before we sell property, do we go through like department heads input as it relates to like the water department? Do they have any say as it relates to this sale?
From what I've been told from Corporation Counsel, this has gone through all the channels and it's been approved through all the channels that is required.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Seeing none, could I get, I'm just gonna scroll through. Can I get a motion to move this forward with a positive recommendation? Motion by Councilmember O'Brien. Can I get a second?
Second.
From Councilmember Duche. Committee members, all in favor, please put your hands up. So that is Judy. I'm assuming Mike is a yes. I'm
Yes.
a yes.
Should have
And
my
It's,
hand up here.
it's unanimous with those present.
okay, I was gonna say Alfredo. You're the only one I can't see.
I'm here.
Excellent.
So can I ask, how can you see other people at this point?
I have to scroll down, and I think JR can see them more easily because as an admin, you've got magical powers. Or
I've
has magical powers. We don't even know.
I minimize the screen share because I have the law on another screen, so I minimize it so it's expanded on my end. So
next up, we have Ordinance 5.41.20, and this is an ordinance for the Common Council authorizing a sale of 39 Columbia Street, Association LLC, a city-owned lot along Von Trump Street. And I believe this is also Councilmember Love's. And I am assuming, Joyce, you don't have anything. This is another lot.
It's another lot. I'm good. I'm good. I'm good. As long as we get the cash for it.
That's right. Do we have any questions with this? And
Judy does.
go ahead,
I
Judy.
can't even see if you can see my hand raised. Because I can't bring up the gallery view at all. When this was introduced, I took a look at the parcels around there, and the amount of the land value that the parcels are assessed at, and I took a look at the appraisal report. So first of all, for the land value of the adjoining property and some of the other properties in the area, this, if you look at that, this is undervalued as compared to those. And I was not impressed or comfortable with the properties that the appraiser compared it to, and then I want to say seeming to discount this. So I raised those issues when this was introduced. I'm wondering if anybody took a closer look at those issues as to whether or not the appraisal amount is appropriate. We need every dollar we can get, and I don't want to undersell property.
Especially right now. I think the issue is, the reason why this has such a lower value is because of, if you look at the property itself, it's not the same, it's not a full lot size, and it's odd shape. I mean, so it's, I think it's a difficult, it's not a clear property in terms of appraisal. That was the response that I remember getting. So if we're looking at the actual property, it's not like a regular vacant lot.
Right,
Actually build something. You can't build something on this lot. It's odd, and where it is a difficult place to kind of do anything with.
So I guess,
I think Councilmember Joyce is saying something.
yeah.
It's just a small patch. And they already own the land around it. It's just a small patch. That's what it was. Just a small patch.
Yeah.
I have a question. Oh, sorry.
So I guess my qualm about it is, for this particular developer, this is a real bargain, because it's, I think, probably more valuable to them than the amount of money that we are selling it for, but it wouldn't necessarily be as valuable to other people.
Correct.
It's kind of like that issue with the property, the convention center, the old convention center property, where the holdouts are like, well, this is worth a ton of money now because you really want it, to be able to complete that project.
Right.
However, in that case, because it's for the public good, I agree with the action being taken to use eminent domain on that. So I guess I'm okay with this.
Yeah, I just want to add a follow-up question similar to Judy's. John Raphael, you said earlier that before these sales, it goes through the proper channels. Can you share a little bit more what the proper channels are as relates to some of these sales? Because we're going to see more and more of this moving forward. And I just want to know that it's being thoroughly vetted before we give some of these properties away, some of these land away.
Unfortunately, I don't know what channels it really goes through. Usually when it comes to me, Corporation Counsel has already vetted it and it's gone through. I unfortunately cannot speak to it. I can definitely follow up with you and figure out exactly what it entails, but I don't have the answer for that, unfortunately.
Yeah, and I was,
Keith, can you share any information, or Darius or somebody, as relates to the process?
I can jump in there, Councilman. I mean, it's not much information, but I do know when any of these properties are being considered to be sold, there's emails that include myself, Joe Coffey, Sergio, any department that really has their hands on property. We're all involved in, it's not an in-depth discussion, but we are made aware of it. And I think that everyone does the same thing and just looks at their files to see if there's anything outstanding or any issues known and reports back to Rob McGee.
Yeah, the crucial component really is the appraisal.
Can I just correct something that Owusu said? We're not supposed to be giving these properties away. We are supposed to be selling them at some basis of value if it's at a private sale, in either the assessed value or the appraised value.
Thank you for that.
Thanks, Richard. Captain Obvious.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Councilwoman Farrell, just want to let you know for the record, Council President Ellis and Councilman Johnson have entered the meeting as well, just for the record.
Welcome, gentlemen.
Raphael, did you get my name? I didn't hear it earlier. It's Kathy.
Yes, I got you earlier.
Thank you.
So with nothing further, could I get a motion to report this with a positive recommendation?
I'll make the motion.
Thank you, Judy. Could I get a second?
Councilman O'Brien has his hands raised.
Thank you. And all in favor of passing through the committee with a positive recommendation? The only one I can't see is Alfredo. Is your hand?
It's unanimous.
It's unanimous. Excellent. Thank you, everyone. That passes through with a positive recommendation. And last, before we move on to the presentation from the budget people, we have 29.41.20R, a resolution affirming the manner in which the City of Albany grants real property tax exemptions to veterans and calling on the state legislature to bring the statewide veterans exemptions in line with the City of Albany's practice. So this is, Trey Kingston has done an excellent job of kind of digging through and aligning things properly, making sure that we are compliant with our rules and regulations and laws. And it turns out that we have been giving for quite some time. At least 40 years, Trey, as long as
it was 1998, so about 22 years.
22 years, sorry. But since 1998, so since this exemption has been in existence, we have been giving, what you were supposed to do is give a step up. So the combat veteran was supposed to be getting 25%, but instead, the way our assessment office looked at that was they added the lower level with that 25% to give that combat veteran 40%. We've been doing that since 1998. And so we basically, to give our assessment office the ability to continue this practice that we've been doing for 22 years, I talked with Trey about having this legislation, so the onus is more on us versus his office. And we will be, of course, right now, we don't really know exactly what's happening with the legislature, but we will be working with our elected representatives to get in bills to hopefully make a fix for this, at least locally. So I don't know if you have anything else to add with that, Trey.
No, but if anyone has any questions.
And I can't see any hands, so JR, if anybody has their hand up.
Councilwoman Dushay has
Oh,
one.
Go ahead, Judy.
So how many combat veterans do we have that are getting, and what exactly is it a 40% of city tax, or is it city and school tax, city, county? What is how many
There's about 758, I think. This is city specific. The school district, for some reason with this exemption, has the ability to adopt their own. They have adopted at lower levels, but on the city's part, the code that was adopted in '98, it allows it to grant 40, which exceeds the state's maximum of 25%.
Ginny, just for the record, Councilman Robinson and President Pro Tem Kimbrough, they just entered the meeting.
Excellent. Welcome, gentlemen.
Looks like Councilman O'Brien had his hand up, I believe. Yes, he does.
Oh, Mike, go
Yeah.
ahead.
Yeah. So is it lawful? I mean, okay, we inadvertently gave 40% to 758 people, but is it lawful for us to do that, or do we want to rethink that, particularly in these times?
I would say it's probably technically not lawful because you don't have, the legislature did not give us that permission. However, as with many pieces in this, I'm not sure exactly what the teeth would be on it. And I don't know that anybody on the council, even during these times, wants to say to a combat veteran, I know for the past 22 years you've been paying at this tax rate, but we messed up and you actually should be paying at this higher tax rate.
And additionally, Councilwoman, to add to that, like my biggest fear about this is the combat veterans who received financing based on what our current law was. And I mean, that could just be absolutely catastrophic on many levels. They were approved for mortgages and other types of financing based on our city code, allowing 40%, and now we're just going to reduce it to 25%. That's what I think scares me the most about this.
Well, I was wondering if there's any way of checking that out to see how many people are actually in that situation.
It's 758.
All have
that have the exemption. Yeah,
and they all have their financing contingent upon the tax exemption of 40%.
Yeah, I have no way to know actually who has mortgages and who doesn't. But that's just a thought that I assume that it's probably a good number of them.
Right.
I did reach out to Tax and Finance several times about this. And one reason why I believe going forward we won't have too much resistance is that their stance has been the same every single time, which is it's up to the municipalities on how they would like to administer their exemption. So they actually haven't flat out said no. They haven't said yes either, but they really are in the position that they want to leave it up to the municipality to decide what's right.
Mm-hmm. Well, I was wondering, okay, but I don't know. I guess my reservation is, shouldn't we have a better idea how many people actually have their financing contingent upon this? And is there some way of doing it prospectively so that, since this was an accidental 40%, is there some way of doing it prospectively so that new people coming in would be at the state authorized exemption rate? And I say that as not a combat veteran, but as a veteran.
The only issue, well, first off, to your first point, Councilman, finding out who has financing, who doesn't, would require, talking to each individual. That could be a hefty task in itself. But as
Okay.
far as the
It
giving
was done prospectively.
my issue with that is, the main basis of assessment is equity and equality, and I don't know, I have a little reservation when it comes to
Okay.
treating, people differently. I understand this is a very unique situation, but with assessment and exemptions, you don't, you want to treat everyone exactly the same.
Yeah, of course, the non-veterans are going to say this isn't equality. They were just saying that it was an accident.
I found that most, because I was on the school board when we put in the veterans exemption, and there wasn't, trust me, on the school board, we had a ton of blowback on taxes regularly. And this was the one thing that we did that people did not mind. So I don't know how much of a blowback we actually would get for this. I think a lot of people are very comfortable giving veterans benefits. They're appreciative, especially combat vets. Alfredo, you had your hand up.
I was just gonna say, I think we should honor. I know there's other municipalities that actually have even more generous set programs for their combat veterans that live in their communities. So I think we should honor what we've been doing for all combat veterans. And
Yeah, I'm
I
not
do respect your
aware.
position, Mike, especially with you being a veteran. I respect that, but I respectfully disagree. I think we should honor what we've been doing and continue it for all combat vets.
Are there any other questions?
Nope. No more.
If there's no other questions, could I get a motion to pass this through with a positive recommendation?
I will make that motion.
Assembly member, I'm giving you a promotion, Judy. Councilmember Bishop. And can I get a second?
Councilmember Ballard raised his hand.
Excellent.
Okay.
And all in favor, if you're on the committee, please put your hand up. I can only see Mike.
And I see it's unanimous. I see it.
Excellent. Passes through with a unanimous recommendation. Thank you so much, Trey, for finding this and for bringing this to our attention. It's really appreciated, and we really appreciate the work that you're doing, kind of going through and making sure that we are following the law appropriately.
Thank you for helping me walk through this.
Absolutely. So now, any staff members that are not involved in this next part, please feel free to go enjoy your evening, or you're welcome to stay and hang out with us. But I believe the floor is turned over to David Galin. I don't see Mike Wheeler on here.
He's here.
He's there.
Oh, there you are, Mike. You're right in the middle of my
Brady Bunch screen.
but it's like now we're the Muppets. There's so many of us, so you're right in, like, I don't even know whose spot. So Mike and David, if you guys want to take the floor, that would be great.
You're muted, David.
You're muted. I can't.
Rookie mistake. Good evening, everyone. We do have a very short PowerPoint presentation, and then I'm going to try to share a screen here to bring it up. Bear me 2 seconds here.
Can we get a copy of that?
Yes. Can you see it? Maybe.
I can on my end. I don't know if anybody else can.
I can.
I can too. It's
You can see it.
the watermark makes it a little bit difficult to read, but.
Can you see it better now? Is it bigger?
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
looks good.
Yeah.
All right. So last Monday, the mayor announced our projection of potential revenue impacts as a result of the COVID-19 outbreak and the economic downturn that's occurred as a result. Since then, the budget office has been working very hard to narrow down in essence, what the problem is. And this slide captures that. The problem is that we now have an estimated 19% decrease in revenues anticipated because of the COVID-19 outbreak. And you can see there it's partially capital city funding, partially an estimated 20% decrease in state aid, which is obviously capital city funding separated out. And for those of you that may not be aware, remember off the top of your head, there's capital city funding, there's 19A money, and then there's AIM funding. So there's three state aid buckets, but capital city funding we've isolated out. So the state aid is separate of that. Then we've also got an estimated 19% decrease in sales tax, a 33% decrease in departmental income. So that's income like building permits, different fees, licensing, permitting, etc. And then finally the all other income, which is a kind of a combination of a bunch of little buckets. So really it works out to an estimated revenue decrease of $17.9 million. So that is the problem. We are looking at a $17.9 million hole in our budget right now that, as you all know, it's constitutionally required that we keep that balance. So I'll go to any questions on this slide before I move to the next one.
Yes.
Yes, we have Councilmember O'Brien.
Departmental income, has the landfill seen a decrease in revenues, and how much?
Mike, do you know off the top of your head?
Joe Gablehouse has said that it is slower than normal, but we haven't gotten all the numbers in yet. So I can certainly reach out to Joe and look and see what we have and let you know.
I mean, wouldn't that have been a big chunk of departmental income, more so than building permits? And
yeah, but we're not really we're not expecting to lose landfill for the course of the year. Generally, it does start out very slow in the first quarter and then ramps up. So DGS did not indicate that they were looking necessarily for a decrease to that landfill. They expect to come in where they normally do.
And one other thing for departmental income, it also includes the revenue that we receive from the parking authority from their operations.
That's standard, of course.
And as you know, metered parking has been suspended for almost 2 months now. So that's having a big impact on that.
And parking ticket.
Right.
And that too.
So the parking authority number supports the PSOs?
What do you mean by that, Richard?
Well, didn't we transfer the PSOs from our budget over to the parking authority? Prior to that, the parking authority paid us an amount to offset the cost. But a couple of years ago, we actually moved the PSOs over to the parking authority.
I think so.
The PSOs are not on our payroll. They're on the parking authority's payroll.
So that any impact that there might be on PSOs, which wouldn't be reflected in these numbers, is a different issue. And that does relate to certain enforcement issues. That's an issue that the parking authority has to deal with.
Correct.
So that's an impact to us, in effect, outside of what you're presenting.
I'm not sure if I'm following, Richard. Are you referring
I was
to
saying
like
that there's an impact on the PSOs that we're not really capturing because they are on direct payroll of the parking authority as opposed to in our budget. Yeah.
That's accurate. Yes. This does not encapture the entire parking authority impact that they're feeling as a result of COVID. This is just the revenues that the city receives as part of the operations agreement.
And those revenues are, I'm just trying to remember, what do we receive?
Do you have the sheet right in front of you, Darius? I don't want to give you the wrong numbers, but part of it is meter revenue. Part of it is
Yeah, there's a percentage of the meter revenue.
Okay, yeah, I mean, I don't see that as a transfer because that's our money to start with. They're just collecting it, but I don't see that as a transfer from the authority. Never mind.
Dave, Mike, could you just give an overall picture of how you arrived at these numbers and the percentage of reductions?
Yeah, I mean, these numbers, the percent reductions were really derived from conversations that we've had with the other layers of government. Obviously, the county collects sales tax, and in regards to the state aid, listening to the governor's daily press briefings, he's routinely used 20% as a target for potential impacts to the state. So that's where those numbers are coming from. Again, I just want to make sure we're all keeping in mind these are forecasts that really change by the minute. So this number could be drastically different in a week, never mind the end of the year.
And as far as the departmental income goes, we spoke to the department heads individually to get what they were seeing, and based on staying in a closed pattern for at least another month or so, and really kind of hypothesizing what they were going to see for the remainder of the year. Pretty much all that departmental income came directly from department input as to what they were expecting based on what they were seeing for the remainder of the year.
I see Tom Hoey and Owusu Anani, and then Councilwoman Duche, and then Richard.
Let me take Councilwoman Shea because she's on the committee.
Okay.
And then we'll go Judy, Tom, and then Richard.
And then Owusu was there too.
Oh, and I'm sorry, Owusu. Okay, got it.
So I'm struggling with also how, especially the departmental income was arrived at. One of the things that is almost $1 million is like police detail. We would expect police detail to be down significantly as a revenue source because we have a lot fewer events going on. But along with that, you then have less overtime associated with that. Is that going to be reflected someplace else?
It is. When we are seeing a reduction in overtime because of a decrease in police details, and also in some of the court OT as well. So that is being recorded as decreases and savings on the expense side of things. So yes, you will see that recorded elsewhere. We are using all those expense side savings to offset these revenue shortages as well. So it's all part of the mix as to how we're going to fill this gap in.
So there will be no golf fees, and that's about almost $600,000 was in the budget for that.
It's very similar with golf as well, that we are going to see a significant reduction in our budgeted revenues, but on the other side, there's also a reduction in having the golf course closed as far as materials and personnel and things of that nature. So some of these things in some of this revenue is not necessarily completely lost revenue because there are back-end savings associated with much of it. So that is all being calculated into the bottom line formula.
How are we doing on EMS revenues these days?
Calls are down about have been down about 33%. So we are seeing decreases in EMS revenue. We do think that once hospitals open up and people feel comfortable again, that should go back to normal. But at this point, we have seen decreases in EMS calls about 30%.
We have $2.5 million in the budget for a waste collection fee. Where are we on that? As that's a departmental link.
Yeah, that will likely not be really affected because the bills are expecting, we're expecting at this point the bills to go out in early June. But those are ones that we will be rolling over onto people's tax bills for next year as well. So those are usually, there may be a reduction in collected cash compared to budget for this year, but from an accounting standpoint, it really is the same thing because the county would reimburse us once we had that amount of tax bills for next year.
Right. So, so the biggest revenue, departmental revenue is associated with the landfill usage charges.
I think parking tickets as well.
Yeah, parking.
So that's interesting because I don't see that in the budget as part of the departmental income totals. So it's interesting that the budget. What do you have for the total? Departmental is 16. Oh, you have down 16 because the budget shows it as at 11.8 in the breakdown. But I see that the primary page. Okay, thank you. Never mind. I'm talking to myself. Sorry.
It's a pleasure to be here with you for that.
Next up, Tom Hoey.
Okay, I'm muted. Yeah, I just got a fast question. I was kind of shocked, and maybe the information I had was wrong, but I had heard we're going to run out of money in June, and yet Schenectady, which is the next county over, and their city, they have enough money till November. So I'm just curious, was I hearing wrong that we're broke in June? And I'd just like to, know what's going on.
You want me to take that, Mike?
If you could, yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah. No. Part of our issue is that we every year hold $14 million of county money during the year as part of the tax warrant, which enhances our cash flow. If the county were to essentially call that in, we would be broke in June. That doesn't mean, however, that other revenues coming during the rest of the ensuing months to put us over the line where we're not broke. But we have to prepare for the worst case scenario, which would be actually running out of money in June. The good news is that the state made its first 19A payment to us, about $7.8 million. And that was one of the things we were concerned about, that if that 20% hit that Cuomo's been talking about to aid to cities wouldn't just affect the capital city funding side or the AIM side, it would also affect the 19A side. But it looks to be, at least for now, that we're safe there, which helps. And actually having that cash in hand, which a few weeks ago we weren't sure that was going to be happening. So I think we're in the short term for right now. We have enough cash on hand. The problem that we face is the uncertainty on especially cap city funding, state aid, sales tax, and then the amalgamation of the smaller revenues on the departmental side on what we're going to see there. That's when, and by the time that we start to see the effects of that on the cash side, it's going to be too late for us to react in a way without, essentially, stopping operations. I'm exaggerating slightly, but not that much. So we have to prepare for the worst case scenario, or at least a reasonable worst case scenario, which is what we have in front of us here.
Well, Darius, my big concern is the city employees. We released 40 crossing guards. I understand school's closed. I can see that. Are we going to be laying off other city employees before we know for sure, taking that conservative approach? Or can we wait and see if we're going to get the federal aid, and will that filter down?
You actually answered the question, Tom. We're waiting with very bated breath right now to see what happens in Washington. If the package that I think is being voted on this Friday in the House, if that actually comes to some sort of fruition, I think we might be able to forestall a fair amount of draconian measures that we might otherwise have to take. If that doesn't happen, we don't see indications of that in the very near future, then it's a different story.
Okay, and could we do any kind of short-term, like lending, if we know this stuff's going to come true? And because you had made a point that sometimes by the time you get the money to ramp up, is there anything that we're allowed to do to borrow short-term? And I'm sure the rates are really low right now.
Well, the rates have kind of been all over the place, and that's part of the problem. And all the municipalities in the country have been downgraded on their outlook to negative. So the borrowing is not necessarily as cost effective as you might think.
Okay.
That being said, we have been in discussions with our advisors on it. The issue we have right now is that our short-term options are essentially fairly limited. Revenue anticipation notes, which are very short, and we probably wouldn't use. Tax anticipation notes, which would essentially be borrowing off the property tax amounts come next January, and those you can put those out for as long up to a year. There's deficiency notes, which were almost never used by municipalities, and we're all going through the X's and O's of that right now to see if we can do that. And those have a little bit of a longer term. There is an effort. There's a couple efforts that are also going on out of Washington. One is to essentially allow the states to the states would be able to borrow in ways that they're not usually able to borrow, and take that giant chunk of money and then essentially buy up the debt of the municipalities at the local level if we were to issue short-term debt like that. So instead of going out to the open market and selling a RAN or a TAN to JP Morgan or something like that, the state would buy it at a very low interest rate for us, and that'd be a way to get through it. The other thing is extending the life of the RANs, TANs, and deficiency notes, either through our ability in New York State or at separately on the federal level, where the payback period is now 5 years or longer. And frankly, given I don't know if it's a pipe dream or not, but we're giving out money to the PPP, those big chunks of money that are conceivably being turned into forgivable loans. That's something that really should happen for the local levels as well. But I will say right now, yes, we're keeping an eye on that and keeping ourselves prepared in order to keep going. But the options are not terrific on that side, on the borrowing side.
Are you also working with the governor's office? Is he giving us any guidance? I know they're waiting for the tax revenue July 15th for the income tax, but will that help us? When we have that number in place.
Yeah, that's more helpful for the state. We don't really directly rely on income tax revenue. Having the income tax revenue come in a good fashion is what ends up allowing them to I think more clearly say whether or not they can fully fund us for AIM or for capital city funding and those other obligations to localities. But I don't know that the July now tax date is going to have a huge effect one way or the other. It's more the normal course of business, quite frankly.
Thank you.
So I would also ask because this is just the first slide, there are other slides. So just to remember that we need to kind of go through this. So I have Richard, Owusu, Alfredo, and Judy. If anybody, I'll keep those order of names, but if we could possibly move, if your question does not have to do with this, could we maybe keep going? Because I would love to get through the presentation and then really focus on questions. Does that make sense to people? So can we?
I'm okay with that.
I'll keep that order of in that order, but if we could just get through the presentation, so maybe write your questions down if there's some, I understand sometimes there's something you need, like a clarification point, but on the larger questions, let's let them get through the presentation and then let's ask their questions.
Jenny, I got my questions ready. Did she see it? No.
Oh, see, look at you. That's perfect. Good job. All right.
All right. So
okay, so we're skipping. All right, go ahead.
Oh, did you want to go? Wait, did I jump the gun?
Something specific in that, Richard, that you want?
Yeah, so quick question. One was on the 19A money. You did say you got the 7.8 million recently. Is that the amount that we would ordinarily get this time of the year?
Yes.
Okay, so you're anticipating that there'd be that our remaining amount is safeguarded from potential cut, but we don't know that, do we?
That's it. Yeah, we don't know it for certain. I would think if anything off this list was the safest, I think the 19A money would be. So the other 7.8 million, which they usually pay us in October-ish.
Okay. Another quick one on the sales tax collections where you have a 19% reduction. Just the other day, the state comptroller came out with a report that indicated April collections, which would have been the first full month during the pandemic or the close down, were off significantly more than that. And that's a high impact month, I assume, and it'll change. Does that in any way color your projections of sales tax reductions, which you right now have at 19%? Is that a higher amount that might, make you reconsider that maybe the sales tax fall off might be higher?
I think there's a very good chance it will be myself. Yes.
Okay.
And Darius, I can follow up a little bit on that. Richard, the reason why that there really is a 25% reduction built into the remainder of the year, but the first quarter sales tax was significantly higher than it was last year. By about 400,000. So when you weigh them together, it comes to 19. But for the remainder of the year, we're assuming a 25% reduction in sales tax.
Okay, and these reductions that you're showing are for what you're projecting for the remainder of the year.
Correct, but we weighed it because our first payment was high.
Right. All right.
Yeah, Mike based these on taking into account the actuals until the moment in time, and then evaluated from there.
Okay, let's keep going.
Okay, so this is, just so you know, this is the other slide. So again, the 17.9 is the problem. We have a $17.9 million revenue reduction that's projected as a result of the economic downturn. And with that, we've begun to take a very, very deliberate and cautious approach as to how we begin to fill the gap. So this slide shows you that the first two options, the first two components of filling this gap are a $3.5 million debt reserve payment and a $4.5 million fund balance payment, or I should say an allocation, using that money to offset potential service cuts and layoffs. Because again, this entire time we have been focused on coming up with scenarios that are going to have the least impact on our employees, the least impact on our residents, and really make sure that we are identifying additional ways to fill these buckets before we have to get to the real dire and difficult decisions. So again, the 3.5 and the 4.5 are what we're building in on the top. The remaining 9.9 is we're calling it the budget cuts, but this is the amount of money where we are constantly running different scenarios to determine how we can fill this gap, and again impact the least amount of people possible. We have looked at every department, we've looked at every operation, We know that the 9.9 million is going to result in potential cuts to entire operations. It's going to result in potential layoffs to a number of individuals, but we are still going through the process of determining the least impactful scenario that gets us the remaining 9.9 million without unnecessarily upsetting either our employees or our residents. So this is where we are at the moment. We've been working with a number of different organizations, such as the New York State Department of Labor. We're in talks about a potential job sharing program that may be able to stave off some layoffs and impacts to our employees. We've been looking at different grant funded positions and identifying potential opportunities where we can slide current employees into our grant funded vacancies, so that way we can again keep them on the payroll and not lay them off, but still be able to save the money from the total budget. So this is really where we are right now, is figuring out what the remaining 9.9 million looks like.
David, can I just do like a clarification point? So you said that this was your last slide?
This is the last slide.
So it was my understanding, and what we discussed was having a pretty in-depth conversation tonight about exactly what was happening. Is that not happening anymore? And I'm just
unfortunately, because these scenarios are
that decision made.
Okay, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, Ginny. What was that at the end?
I'm just curious at what point that decision was made and why that wasn't shared with us, because that's, as a council, we need to have this information, and it was completely discussed that tonight was the night that we were going to discuss it. So I'm curious, number one, why that's not happening, and number two, why there was not even the courtesy to give us the heads up that that was not what was occurring this evening. Because we, as a council, have prepared for this, and we would have loved to prepare with the information, but it is, it's very frustrating to have something changed mid-course without even the courtesy of saying, by the way, we're unable to do it. We are reasonable people, and we're willing to work with people when we're given information. When we're not given information, it's a very frustrating exercise.
I understand your frustration, Ginny. I think I can speak on behalf of Mike and really Darius too. We've been at this for days on end, running different scenarios day after day after day. The situation continues to change daily. It continues to change up to the hour, and we are not going to unnecessarily scare our employees or our residents by jumping to a scenario where we may impact people and then have to reverse course and not impact them. There's no reason to scare our employees if we don't need to. We're going to make sure that we get to the lowest number possible of layoffs and impacts to our employees. Only late this afternoon, we got confirmation from ACDA that some of these grant funded positions are going to be able to take on some of the employees that may have been subject to layoffs. So again, I understand your frustration, and we're committed to doing, to having a transparent and honest conversation about where we will have to account for service cuts to our residents and to our employees. But we are not going to jump into a discussion about individuals or operations unnecessarily when we're not 100% certain that we need to impact them. So
I do fully understand
the long and short of it is that we're gonna make sure that we're not scaring the people who work day in and day out on the front lines to rush to a decision that doesn't need to be rushed at this very moment.
I understand that, and I respect that. And I believe everyone on this council agrees with that. I fully appreciate, I'm aware of how much Mike has been working and how much the budget office has been working, trying to do like a Rubik's Cube of filling things in. However, I feel like, and I know we're in a public meeting. Everybody on Facebook is watching right now. I understand that that's scary too. And I understand there are some things that cannot be shared in a public manner before you know. But at some point, I'm assuming before this meeting, you had the idea that you could not give us that information tonight. And I don't understand why that wasn't shared. And I also am really curious exactly what is the timeline, because this is not a transparent process. We were given, I mean, as a council, when we're looking at our own budget, I don't know how I'm supposed to make those decisions in a vacuum, and that's what you're asking us to do. And I find that completely unacceptable.
We were asking the council and departments to make recommendations based on a scenario where we are continuously evaluating that scenario. The scenario has changed 3 times since we last had a conversation, and we're not going to rush the process because the council has scheduled a finance committee meeting on a Thursday evening, and that's going to be the time where we're going to announce when we might have to make the most difficult decisions.
So just out of curiosity, when was the heads up that you were going to change course? Because that was the plan. I understand things change, but at what point were you going to tell the finance committee before this meeting? Because
again, we got late information this afternoon about grant-funded positions
what time
that might be able to accept. Sorry, go ahead.
What time was that?
Not even an hour and a half ago.
Okay.
But to be clear, on Monday when we had our council leadership meeting, I made it very clear to the entire council leadership that this conversation would likely involve us not having set scenarios because the scenarios keep changing.
Absolutely.
So,
but we were also supposed to have be able to have a healthier discussion. The other piece is, one of the reasons why I wanted Mike here was to actually walk us through the different pieces. I'm fine with that, but as a council, we need to be part of this. We have to actually look at this. That's the job of the finance committee. We have to be able to dig in. And the other thing is, I don't know, I mean, maybe JR can help with this. Is this something that we have to vote on? Or is this something that the mayor can do? Because if we have to vote on this, then we're going to need a lot more information. You need to factor that into your planning process, because right now this is not transparent.
Regardless of what council action is necessary or not unnecessary, we're committed to a transparent process, but we are not going to rush the process.
We look forward to that transparent
fulfill the
process.
council's
Please
timeline.
let us know when you're ready.
In exchange for laying people off or unnecessarily scaring them, and then maybe not needing to lay them off. I think I'm confident when I speak for the mayor in saying that is not what we are going to do. We are not going to scare the employees who have been on edge for the last several weeks because Washington refuses to act and just to fulfill a council time.
So it makes sense to not prepare them and then spring it on them at the last minute. When we talk about open and honest conversations, again, we all own this. We all own this, and we all would rather not be here. But these conversations we need to have. I mean, it really, as our function as a council, we need to know these things. We need to discuss and be able to talk through this stuff. People can take the truth.
I also think
put it
that
out there.
Fine line. I understand. I don't want to scare people either, but you have to understand the people in this city are also scared. The people in the city also want to know what's happening. And if you need council action, we need information. And I also, just as a courtesy, if there's a different plan for a committee meeting, even if it's a half an hour before, let the person know. It's just courtesy. We do have questions. Owusu, I believe you were up next.
Yeah. All right. I don't even know where to start, but I'm the type of council member that always like to look at the shiniest side of the mountain, right? Like the glass is half full kind of person. Let's say we get this federal aid. How many people do we expect to lay off?
If we get federal aid?
Yeah, and how much are we looking for in federal aid? If you want.
Well, I think that's a question I can't really answer because I don't know what federal aid we will get. I mean, if we get 17.9 million in federal aid, we'll,
Gotcha.
but if we get 3 million in federal aid, that's a whole different conversation. If we get somewhere in between, that's just a, it all depends. The answer really is it depends. But
So as I just want to know, as of right now, would the city have to go over the tax cap if we were to just say today, if we don't get the federal aid, will we have to go over the tax cap possibly?
The 2%?
Yes, the 2% tax cap
That would be a possibility for next year.
for next year.
yeah, we wouldn't for this year if you're
Gotcha.
No.
I reserve the remainder of my questions. I was expecting more from this, but again, I understand where the administration is coming from as it relates to, there's a lot of moving parts as it relates to the federal and the state levels. But the only thing I would ask is that, try to keep us involved as best as you can. But yeah.
I believe we were all expecting more. Next up, Councilmember Ballerin.
My question has to do with the cash flow versus fund balance. I see we're going to use 4.5 million of the fund balance. Will we be able to use the remaining to get us through tough times with cash flow, or do we only able to use our operation expenses to get through?
It depends on a lot of things, and it's really not something you can think of in quite those kind of black and white terms, because of when revenues come in, which revenues come in, how much of those revenues come in, how much they don't. Budgetarily, I would say, theoretically, the rest of the fund balance would be there to be utilized, but it's tough to answer, definitively, really, at this point in time without more information from revenues coming in downstream.
How much do we have left in fund balance?
We got about 9 million or so right now, which is at this point, I don't know if fiscal stress really means much of anything anymore since everybody's under fiscal stress, but it's still under where we're essentially supposed to be based on New York State Comptroller guidelines.
So this would use roughly half of our fund balance?
This would use about roughly half, yes.
That was my main questions. Thank you.
Yeah. Next up, Judy, and then I believe Mike O'Brien's hand is up as well.
Okay. Thank you for being the chair, Jenny. I appreciate your frustration with this, and I think I've made it clear that I have shared similar frustrations in the past, and I certainly share your frustration currently at us holding this meeting and essentially being shut out of the discussion for this. First question that I have is exactly how much in income, departmental income, what is the amount for reduction from the parking authority, parking fees?
From parking tickets?
It was noted earlier that when we're talking about departmental income, that there is
parking authority income you're talking about, or just parking ticket revenue?
Well, anything that is being reduced, I want to know. I want to know what portion of that 5.38 million. So you guys have some specific way in which you're coming up with these figures.
It's just above $1 million, Judy, that we're expecting to reduce that number.
So $1 million for parking tickets, or $1 million from the parking authority?
It's $1 million for the whole grouping.
Okay. I mean, I think that, better providing us with a breakdown of your projections on that should not be something that should be withheld from us at this point. I think, the other things are fairly understandable. The breakdown for all other income would be beneficial as well. Fredo asked my question about the fund balance. I do want to note that the city charter does require council approval of transfers of budgeted funds that exceed 4% of the total annual city budget in any given year. So the numbers you've put up here look like a potential of about 10% of the budget. So I would think that you are talking about the potential of exceeding that 4% amount, at least at some point. And I would, hope that you would respect the fact that the city charter has that in there for a reason, and that the council should be being informed and consulted and respected with regard to the role that we are supposed to play in situations like this. I also want to note that if any one department has a reduction of 37.5% in any given year, that also requires approval by a majority of the Common Council. And I would suspect that there may be at least one department that may be looking at a reduction of potentially that amount, or at least a sub-department for that. So I just, I do like to refer to the city charter, and I have noted that in the past in the budget process, and I just want to make sure you are all aware of that, including the council members in on this discussion. Thank you.
If I may?
Sure.
This is Darius. I think you're 100% accurate on the debt service and on fund balance reappropriation if that comes to pass. I don't know, and you should take a look at whether or not the council has to pass anything if budgets just don't, if expenditures don't meet what they're budgeted for. I think that's what I think would need to be taken a look at from a charter standpoint.
I think, well, we have more questions. Mike O'Brien has a question, but I think John Raphael might have a weigh in on whether or not we have to vote on this.
Yeah, there's the charter, Article 6 of the charter, all transfers of budget funds that exceed 4% have to go for council approval.
So there does need to be council action, it looks like. Mike, do you want to ask your questions? I don't know.
Mike, you're on mute.
You might be muted. Oh, there you are.
Okay. I know Dave in his presentation was talking about the alternative of layoffs, but really there are some other alternatives. And yeah, layoffs would be very scary, but I know we as a council have been kind of thinking about this, and in the press release that was given out today, talks about perhaps some pay cuts, but I don't think pay cuts are things that go totally across the board. I think they should be more targeted to the people at the higher end of things. And we are very cognizant of the fact that certain offices within the city got significant pay increases over the last 2 years when everybody else got 1% or some union contracts slightly more than 1%. So to say that, well, we can't make anything public now because we're going to scare people who might be completely laid off, usually at the lower end of things, I think we should maybe have a candid discussion about some pay cuts at the higher end of things. And I would talk about, you know who I'm talking about. Obviously, those that are above a certain level of pay, particularly those people that got those offices that got significant pay increases in the 2019 and 2020 budget. So I think that's something which you should be candid in looking at, not only looking at, but I think candid in committing to. And I guess that's the most of what I wanted to say.
Can I respond to that?
Sure.
So just to be clear, we hope to be able to provide more information this evening. Again, speaking for Mike and Darius here, and the entire budget office, we've spent countless days working scenarios. We got new information this afternoon where we can potentially stave off layoffs. So again, we're part of being transparent and open is giving the complete picture. Giving a piecemeal approach, I think works counter to being transparent. If I give you one component of something and say, well, here's one department, but the rest of the departments we don't know about. Not only like.
Actually, David, we would take that.
No, but
that would be totally fine.
That's not fair. I truly don't think that's fair to the employees of the one department who might be impacted when we're trying to figure out everybody else. We're leaving employees in the lurch.
To Kelly's point, I also don't think it's fair to employees to make them wait until right now. Every single employee in the city is scared.
Understood.
Because they don't know what's going on, and like keeping people unknown about their job situation is also really terrifying. So again, having lived through horrible budgets, there's no good to it. It is difficult. It's a ton of work. And nobody is happy. It's hard, and I understand that. But I've also, having lived through horrible budgets, they're a lot worse if you hold back information for too long. And
if I could just respond to Dave to my question that I put to him. Dave, I appreciate all the work you're doing on this, and I'm sure you're putting in a lot of extra hours. But I don't see anything, quote, piecemeal at this time in committing the fact that on the higher end, the employees at the higher end of the city, no matter what department they're in, can now publicly commit to the concept of some partial pay cuts, not layoffs, partial pay cuts. And that could be one of the components of solving the problem. But I think it would be a lot more, I don't know, I think it would be well received by the bulk of the employees of the city if they know that the pain is being shared, and those who are more able to diminish their pay are those that are willing to do it. And I would love to hear that. Okay. That's it for me. Yeah, sure. Respond.
So I think it's fair to say that everything and anything is on the table. But that's part of why these scenarios and the work that's going on behind the scenes to be able to provide clarity is so crucial, and why, again, I want to reiterate, being transparent is providing this in one complete package where we can show you every impact and every service and every department that this is going to touch. So I mean, the mayor has communicated with our employees weekly. She has let them know. We continuously let our employees and our senior staff know where we're at in the process. I totally understand that it's very, very frightening for our workforce right now. And that's why we're being so deliberate and so cautious about how we go about this process, because we at the end of the day, want to ensure that we're impacting as few people as possible. With
Well,
the,
I don't think it
the mayor said she
demonstrates.
doesn't want to lay off a single person. However, we're going to make sure that through this process, if we do have to lay people off, it is going to be the lowest number possible.
Yeah, and I don't think it violates any rule of caution as a starter to the conversation to say that the people at the higher end of things may expect a reduction in pay. I think that's a good starter, and I don't think it's uncautious whatsoever.
And I think the one thing we mentioned during our council leadership meeting on Monday was that we are taking an approach where we are evaluating function. We are evaluating the services that may be impacted and the functions of the employees who perform those, who execute and provide those services to city employees. So again, that's how we're looking at this. This is not to hide, truly not to hide anything. I think we all truly wish we could be able to provide more information today. However, we didn't want to rush this process and then figure out.
But Dave, I
there are going
think
to be
you have to,
less people
Dave,
impacted on the back end.
Dave, I think you have to admit that a mere 2 slides is a de minimis amount of information.
And just a couple of, so the grant funded positions that you were able to save, which is such great news. How many positions were those?
So it's, let me read them to you. I don't want to give you the wrong information. 1, 2, it's between, so it could be, I'm adding them up. It could be as many as 22. I think that's the right number. 20. Could be as many as 22.
That's great.
David, is department heads being asked
Hold
to
on.
take pay cuts?
So, Owusu, you have a question, then Richard, if we could.
I had a question to Dave's point that he just made with those positions.
Mm-hmm.
Are those positions, this is ACDA funding that I assume they're getting through the CARES Act?
Well, and some, yes, but some of it is also, don't forget that we get that $1 million grant through the Cities Rise initiative.
Right.
So there are.
So would these positions be transferred to ACDA, or would the ACDA funding be transferred to the respective departments because the function is consistent with the grant money?
I don't want to give you the wrong answer on that. So I don't know. I'm not sure off the top of my head, but we can double check. I know that there's a lot of moving parts in the back, especially with HUD funding. So that, you know, there are a lot of requirements. So, we can find out more about that. But yeah, it's some of it is HUD, but some of it is that Cities Rise grant.
So you had a.
Right. Yeah, I just wanted to know, are department heads being asked to take pay cuts?
Again, we're asking each department and the council included to look at function first. We're doing this based on function. We're doing this based on what services may need to be cut, and looking at if services need to be cut, what employees execute on those services and provide those services. This is we're not opening up the budget book and looking at pay rates and saying, you know, sorting them in a certain order. This is based on function.
I will say that for me, Councilman, I will be.
Okay, thank you.
And I also wanted to note that the council has talked about that as well. We understand that there's some legal limitations, but as a council, our interest is saving jobs, and we are willing to do what needs to be done in that area. And but it would be nice to have a fuller conversation, obviously. Are there more questions?
Oh, if not,
Valerie has his
We
hand
have,
up.
we have
Valerie.
Councilman Robinson and Councilman Ballerin.
Go ahead, Alfredo, and then Jamel, I'll get you next.
I'll let Jamel go first because I spoke before, and now I'll go after Jamel. Thank you.
Thank you so much for yielding it right away. I appreciate it. I too I'm taken aback by the lack of information that's being provided at this meeting. I think we keep mentioning that, they're city employees, but there are also our constituents, and we have a responsibility to our constituents to ensure that we're providing them with the most information possible and being transparent with them, because at the end of the day, transparency does build trust. And the greatest fear right now is fear of the unknown. But one of my questions is, what are the anticipated decreases in expenditures?
That would be the 9.9 million. That's the budget cut number. So we won't have to cut the 3.5 in debt reserve. We won't have to cut the 4.5 in fund balance, but we would have to cut 9.9 million in expenditures.
And then are we also with the non-voluntary tax, the pilot, have we reached out to any of the organizations to see if they're willing to make good on their payments at a decreased amount?
Darius, do you want to touch base?
Yeah, I'm not aware of that, anything of that at this point myself. I believe that the port has paid some of their pilot, and my system, for whatever reason, has just gone down here in City Hall, so I can't look up if anybody else has. But we would, those are revenues that we would, and we have in the past had to make pointed asks for during the course of the year.
Okay. And the last question is, are we keeping track of the demographics of the individuals who may face job losses, such as age, sex, race, during this process?
To be clear, are you asking if we're keeping track of it as we go?
Yes, and even potential, cuts.
Again, I want to stress it's function based. This is we're evaluating function and service cuts. We're not. I think it would be unconstitutional probably. I shouldn't. Well, I am an attorney, but I'm not going to give free legal advice. I think it would be unconstitutional if we looked at things on the basis of sex or race or whatever the case may be. But we're looking at this based on function. We're looking at this based on what service impacts there might be to our residents, and then what functions relate to those services. We're looking at it solely through that lens. And I just want to touch back on the first point you made. Again, I can't stress enough. We hoped to be able to provide more information tonight, but the crux of this is that we think we can save more jobs based on the information we obtain late this afternoon. And we want to make sure that when we're giving this rollout, that it's the most accurate, complete information, because we don't want to create a scenario where we leave a department out or we leave several departments out, and then those employees are now the microscope is on them, and it's just makes it even worse. So again, I understand there's frustration that there isn't more information this evening, and I know the mayor's made this commitment to the leadership, and I'm stressing it again. We are willing and ready to be transparent and open about this process with both our employees, our residents, and the council, but we want to make sure that we are creating the least amount of undue added stress at an extremely stressful time.
And I just want to be clear that I understand that you're looking at function, and I'm not saying that you should base layoffs off of age, sex, or race. But what I'm saying is good information to have to see what people in our city are being impacted by this crisis.
So maybe I misunderstood your question, and I apologize if I did. We certainly can look at that, when we get to the point where we know what impacts there will be to personnel, but we're not keeping an active tally as we go. It's truly just through a function lens right now.
Thank you so much, David.
You're welcome. You're welcome, Councilman.
Councilmember Ballerin.
I'm gonna ask you to maybe have two lenses. I know it's a very difficult time, and I know it's a very difficult situation, and I know that the team that's looking at this is looking at this with very heavy hearts. I understand that, and I understand that function is critical, and that should be one of the lenses. But luckily, we have two eyes and two lenses we can use, and also look at fairness as another lens. So the burden isn't just on certain income groups. I want to echo Darius' statement about taking a pay cut. I think it should be shared. The burden should be shared by all levels of our city government and of our city staff. Those who are given more should be willing to be able to give more now. Elected officials, like Darius said, should also be willing to give. It's the shared burden, and it falls on all of us. It falls on all of us. It's not just the mayor's office and the administration and you, David, or Mike or Darius. It's all of us. We're all in this together. So we should all share the burden to get us through this situation, and get us through it stronger. So I want to make sure, I want to ask that as you're looking at these difficult decisions, that you put on our lens and also make sure that it's fair. Fair for everyone that's in our city, fair so that our workers that may not make a lot or may also feel that they are safe and they're not disposable. And I know and I understand why you want to be very cautious about giving out any information. Where I agree with it or not, I understand where you're coming from. My one concern is we have a class that should be moving forward for our police officers. At one point, we were looking at a 50 people class. So if we're gonna be holding off on making any decisions, we should still be looking at a 50 people class. And I say that because if you have 50 men and women start in that class, you're most likely not gonna get 50 to graduate. Most likely gonna get 40 or 45 on a good year to graduate. And then if you get those 45, once they actually hit the streets, you might have 3 or 4 transfer elsewhere. So now you went from 50 to let's say 40 actually working for us. In that same period of time, in those 6 months, you probably lost another 10 officers to retirement or to other opportunities. So if you start with a class of 50, by the time those officers are fully on our streets, you're still down. And I know we're down 50 officers now, but you'll still be down 6 months from now, 20 officers, even with a class of 50. And I know that there's been some conversation about having the class be smaller than 50. So I was hoping you can give us some information on that.
I very much hear what you're saying. And you make valid points that not everyone makes it through graduation, retirements and people transferring to other departments happens throughout the year. But I think to bring it back to the whole, the entire administration as a whole in this filling this $9.9 million gap, I want to reiterate, every department will be impacted should we have to move forward with these cuts. So I hear what you're saying, but no department, I'll just repeat it again. Every department will be impacted by cuts should we have to move forward.
I guess my whole concern is to put a police officer on the streets fully trained, 6-month lag time. So if we cut the class, you know, that we were looking at it to have a 50-person class, if we cut that dramatically, we can't just turn the switch, you know, 2 months from now if we get the funding. You know, so there are some decisions that we need to make now that, you know, we need to have some clarity on.
Understood. And keep in mind, I mean, there is still construction going on at the new training facility. So, you know, that is one component of it. But again, I just want to reiterate, every department would be impacted via cuts, whether it's a combination of a layoff, a cut, a vacancy kept. Just keep that in mind that as we go through this process, we're looking at every department.
Kathy Fahey had her hand up, and then I see you, so I'll get you next, but she hasn't spoken yet. So
really quickly, first, I just want to thank Dave, you and the other staff members for all the work that you're doing in making these really, really difficult decisions and dealing with the back and forth of this, not knowing exactly what's going to happen. So I really appreciate that. And then I just want to, I agree with a lot of what people are saying here. Absolutely, you want to focus on function and providing essential services. I totally understand that, but the idea of shared sacrifice is really important, I think, to every council member. And to, I know the mayor often refers to employees as a family, and that idea of shared sacrifice is extremely important. You know, we care a lot about the employees, and I know you folks do as well. So thanks, and if you get that message back to the mayor, I appreciate it.
Will do. Thank you, council member.
go ahead, Owusu. And then Judy, your hand is up next.
Yeah, I just want to share the same sentiment with Kathy. It seems like we have heard all we can. Is there any new questions? And also, how can the council help the administration through this process? Like, what can we do to, you know, to help in this situation?
You know, I think, especially as we get this draft scenario fine-tuned, I think it's going to be, the council is going to be able to help, especially with communication. And I think right now the best way the council can help is reiterating to your constituents that they should be calling Mitch McConnell and President Trump right now, because according to the news, the House may vote on the HEROES Act sometime in the next couple days. And I know that the Senate, you know, Senator McConnell in particular, has said that there's no urgency around this issue, but there, you know, negotiations happen all the time. You know, we've seen that with legislation at the federal level over and over again. So calling and writing are the two most impactful ways that not only our council, but also our constituents can help right now. Get their phones ringing, get their inboxes filled with letters from not only our residents, but also our employees, letting them know that our employees have been out on the front lines for the last 2 months, whether it's responding to fires, responding to emergencies, working as dispatchers, picking up garbage, filling potholes, responding to emergency demolitions. The list goes on and on. And you know, I don't know if you all saw the video from DGS earlier this morning that we shared, but you know, our essential workers have stepped up, and now it's time that Washington steps up for them. And I think that the way that the council can help right now is by reiterating to your constituents to call Mitch McConnell and call President Trump over and over and over again to help get the HEROES Act passed. Because if the HEROES Act gets passed, this conversation changes very drastically. So please, I can't reiterate it enough. Reach out to both of those elected officials as soon as possible.
We had mentioned in leadership, possibly if you could share that information to us so we could share it out. So if you could share that with Michelle, that would be great. I know it's difficult to get senators' information if you are not a constituent. So sharing that information with us would be helpful.
Yeah, we have their email, we have their phone number. We'll get that over to Michelle too, so it can get recirculated. Yeah, some of the members, they have a zip code algorithm where if you're not, like I said, if you're not a resident, they don't want to hear from you. But
it would just make it a lot easier on people if that information.
Yeah, no, definitely. We'll get that information over.
Thank you. Judy.
Yeah, so 2 questions. The first one is, you're saying it would be a different conversation. Are you anticipating that we would get approximately $10 million out of the HEROES Act to avoid budget cuts?
I didn't hear the number, Councilmember.
Well, your slide shows $9.9 million in budget cuts.
Mm-hmm.
And you're saying that we would be having a very different conversation if the HEROES Act passes. So I'm asking, would you be anticipating us getting close to 9.9 million? I rounded up to 10 million.
It's been reported that there's hundreds of billions of dollars for state and local governments, and what we're hearing from our delegation is that there's the potential that, you know, again, the bill started, it's a negotiation, but the HEROES Act allocates for significantly more than that. But again, we got to wait and see. We'll see what gets lost at the negotiations table.
I believe it's essentially making up for lost revenues for localities. So, you know, as long as we show we lose the revenues that were reasonably budgeted, I believe that's what it would replace.
So I would have anticipated that it would be some percentage of, as opposed to totally making up those revenues. That's
maybe yes, maybe no.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I think it's too early to say with confidence, because we know how these negotiations go, but
right. I was just
obviously we're shooting for 9.9 and hopefully then some. I mean, really, we're shooting for 17.9. We don't want to use our debt reserve. We don't want to use part of our fund balance. We've worked very, very hard to streamline services, to reduce expenses, to hold the line on taxes, and to build that fund balance up that was pretty much at zero when the mayor first came into office. And this would put a huge dent in that work that's occurred over the last 7 years. So we obviously don't want to use it. And you'll notice it's not the full fund balance, because it's so uncertain as to what will happen in 2021. But yes, to your point, 9.9 would be helpful. 17.9 would be even more helpful.
Even better, right? Absolutely. All right. So the second question I have is, as I'm listening to you talk about function, we had a conversation yesterday. Am I able to say this, Ginny, about how much the conversation was about how much Common Council and clerk might be cut?
I have no idea. I'm not really sure where we are right now with that, because that was kind of part of the anticipation was having more information today. So I have to ask David. I don't know.
Yeah, so some information was shared with us in executive session. So without putting a number on it, we were given a number as a target, and so that sounds a little bit different than looking at functions. I'm wondering how that number was arrived at, and whether every department was also given a dollar amount as a target to reach. Is that part of what is going on in this process?
Mike, do you want to talk about that? Mike does have there is a rhyme to there's some
reason.
There is some,
Yeah,
there is.
Essentially how this is rolling out is, and I do want to apologize that we thought we would have something more together today than what we do, and David spoke to. There's some changing parts and some issues that we just want to clear up before we throw something major out here. But essentially, the majority of the cuts are through what David was talking about as through functions and understanding the functions. But when you get down to some of the departments, like those of us who are on City Hall and planning and things like that, it's difficult to do that at the functional level. So what we've done is from the baseline of where the functions took us, we've moved the next step into those other departments. And what I've done, and I'm certainly not doing it on anyone's behalf and saying that that's your number, but I went back and looked at 3 years of historical data on everybody's non-personnel expense lines for those departments that are doing this exercise. And I basically looked at what we've used historically and where I thought a challenging number, an achieving challenging number would be that could get us to where we need to finish the remaining whole. And alongside that is also some of the personnel savings that were going to be a part of that. So, in the City Hall departments and planning, what you were sent is really the piece your department needs to satisfy this last piece of what we need to fill the gap, and that's kind of where we are. If you look on I think it's the second or third tab where you see I think it's the third tab where you see what I've looked at within your budgets is just to think that you could meet those expectations, but with the rest of it, that's, if you think, and the key is for the departments to look at that and to see, did I miss something, or do you feel you could do something more? That's really was the point of that. I just wanted to get a baseline of what the number that you need to is the number already minus what I've taken out, but you can certainly increase that. Also, what we're finding out, this is also the area where a lot of department heads do want to do that sacrificing to keep people on. So we're seeing some of that come back. So we were hoping that this exercise would have led us to the closing of the gap for today's conversation to really take it to the next level. But it turns out that there were many departments that came in with surpluses, and a couple that just couldn't meet the goal and really gave me sound functional reasons why they couldn't achieve that. And that also caused a bit of a delay in us being able to finalize where we are. So that's kind of the gist of what you have. What you received from us was essentially a piece based on the percentage of your contribution to the total budget of those remaining departments, and what everyone's share needs to be to get us to that final closing gap. So we are very close, and we do have things in place, and there are many things that you talked about. We have established, and there's just some things at the end that could really change what happens for people, and we just didn't feel comfortable with. It's almost like it'd be difficult to show you some and not show you all, because it really is a complete picture. And I do apologize for not letting you know ahead of time. For me, I was just really thinking that we haven't really talked at this point yet. And, I figured we would still want to have these conversations, even if we didn't actually have everything that you thought we were coming with, but that's really kind of where we are in the process and what that one piece that we sent out to the departments means for us closing up the remaining gap.
I'm just a little unclear. I feel like the Common Council serves a function, and our staff serves a function, and the city clerk's office serves a function. I'm not sure why. I mean, maybe it's true for some of the people within, other people within City Hall who don't serve functions in that way. So I don't understand.
If I could, you know, a question for me in my office would be along the function side. Maybe this will clarify it. Is, you know, do we move more towards online presence, and so we don't need as many people at the front desks in my offices? You know, is that a function that can be trimmed back, and therefore is that person an FTE that could be trimmed back? So it's part of the functional side of the equation, and also I think in more specific answer to your original question, and pay cuts are also you know, part of that equation as well. Does that help?
No.
And it really was established.
I don't understand what, I don't really understand what the process is and how decisions are being made. You know, I think for us to see some examples, you know, would be, you know, would be helpful.
I can articulate one or two right now if you'd like. Just like as hypotheticals. I mean, for let's take the auditor's office, for example. If we were to reduce spending it to such a level that that there aren't payments being processed at the volume that they normally are, the function that has reduced is the function of processing payments. That so if we have to let I'm trying to come up with another example. Let's say that I know Darius used his office.
Yeah.
Planning.
Can we talk about you want me to talk about what I did?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. If you want to do that.
All right. You know, Mike goes through the process, goes through our budget, sees what you know, where the target figure might be for cutbacks, and then gives it to me as a department head to try and come up with a figure. And then it's up to me to look at, okay, what functions can we afford or not afford to slough off or we need to have for whatever reason. And we go through the evaluation ourselves and try to come up within that rubric of what cuts might possibly be made if necessary. And again, for me, part of that was chopping off some of my own salary to meet some of these, to meet this scenario. And if the scenario for my office is going to change as a result of, you know, the addition of the 22 positions that are now not going to be able to be cut or not going to have to be cut, that has a downstream effect on everything else. And so now the number in my office may not need to be cut as much.
And another potential scenario.
So can I?
Yeah.
So as I understand it, so Mike looked at things like contractual services and supplies and that kind of thing and suggested a certain amount. And then the departments, each department was still then said, well, we still need to come up with X amount more dollars out of your department. Is that right?
Yeah, basically.
But
then my question is, how was that latter figure arrived at in terms of, like, is there some uniform percentage that is being applied that is a target for all departments, or is there a uniform percentage then that is being applied for a target that people are being asked initially to be looked at? And is that equitable?
Mike?
Well, it's the way that we're looking at it is it's a bit of a combination of both. Primarily, it's being done through function. At the smaller departments, it's being done as not necessarily across the board cuts, but where there's opportunity. And I guess, I'm sorry, I wasn't clear about, this was kind of like phase one of the process. And then the expectation was that the departments would come back and, like Darius said, let us know what, what functions are impacted or what can't be, why they can't achieve it, because if they don't do this function, that won't happen. And then we could recalculate and look at that. So it was a first wave to be designed to really come up with what functions in these departments do we have to look at deeper and really shift some of these dollars around. This was not meant to be the final exercise in this process, which is why we're a bit delayed in our overall process, as well as finding out other sources of funding and also looking at, with the job sharing and maybe some other alternatives to layoffs. So we just were pushed back further than we thought, but really this was kind of meant to look at your department, not cut and slash somebody, but be like, well, if we were to reduce this function or move the function, we need to necessarily lose this person and then go back into what's been done. It was really just meant to be kind of a kickstart. And, I probably really didn't explain that well enough.
And so again, you're not applying a certain percentage to all departments.
No, we're not asking for like we want an 8% cut across the board. It comes out to this is just a starter of what can you do? It's established as a percentage of what your responsibility is to a total bucket, but it's not meant to be, we want 8%, 9% out of you and that's it. It's about, here's where I've already seen some opportunity, and here's where your remaining dollars are, but we also need to know, what functions are impacted, what you can do, or what alternatives you may have to being able to do that in a different way. And then we just kind of will pull it all together and see really how it all plays out. So that's really the piece that has slowed us down a little bit too, as well as some of the other moving parts. I'm not sure if that's helpful, but that's how we kind of envisioned it, that you would get essentially a piece based on where you, like your contribution to that bucket of money. And then it was up to the departments to work on how they could get there, or if they couldn't get there, why they can't get there, if they could actually do a little more with certain things. That was really where it was supposed to go.
I appreciate the explanation. Thank you.
Jamel, you had a question? And Joe, I'll get you next. Or actually, Jamel, do you mind if I let Joe go because he hasn't asked a question yet? Thank you. Go ahead, Joe.
I have a concern that we're meeting on the 20th. And I know what's going to be brought up. You're reading about in the papers what Schenectady's doing, what Fleet's doing. We're going to hear about being down 50 cops. We're going to hear about 6 fires in 3 days last week. And I don't know how we're going to answer those. I don't even know if we should be holding a meeting on that right now. I mean, we can say, well, they're looking at function. Well, there's functions that have to continue. And there's no doubt about it, I think, in anybody's mind. And that's one of the biggest concerns the public has. And to go through a meeting similar to this with no information for us to give out, and it's our meeting where you people won't be available, I don't know. I don't feel comfortable with it.
Which meeting are you referring to, Councilman?
A public safety council meeting next Wednesday on the 20th.
DGS.
No, it's public safety.
Or general services?
Public safety, sorry.
As
Public
far as
safety.
the chief is still planning on attending.
Public safety, right, Corey?
Yes, it's public safety. But I think the public safety meeting is, I think, Joe, is not about what's happening staff-wise. It's about what are we doing during this process with COVID and seeing the fires and seeing the how are we dealing with that during
In the
this COVID
shootings.
process. Yeah.
Yeah, and
So it's just more than finances.
Right, it's, finance was
It's all
not
gonna come up.
going to be, it will come up, but it wasn't intended to be a part of the conversation. And I mean, maybe it should well be.
Well, if anybody calls in, I think that'll be a big part of it.
Right, I agree. I agree. And we'd have to address that, but that wasn't the way we set out to put that together.
You know, things change a little bit now. I'm fine, I'll be there, you know. I'm gonna say we don't have the answers. They're looking at the function of the departments, that's it. If
There
that
you
comes
go.
up.
Councilmember Robinson, thank you for that.
Yes. So if we do layoffs, are these employees guaranteed their jobs back? And if yes, how are we guaranteed that they get their jobs back?
Our intent would be that any potential layoff would be a temporary one. And again, it all depends on, you know, we have to get to that point where we finish the scenario and feel confident that nothing else has changed, where we can move forward. But at the same time, you know, there's the parallel track here of what goes on in Washington could have a serious impact one way or the other. But the intent would be to, yes, you know, assuming we got the funding from the federal government to replace the lost revenue, our intent would be to bring every employee that is potentially impacted back.
I believe they're entitled to their job back after layoff if we have the money.
Breaking up.
Yeah, and that's not counting any civil service rules that apply. That's just like on principle.
Now, I just got this question because I'm getting emails about it, and I think we should, when we say we can be reimbursed for revenue, and we say, you know, with the golf course issue we're having, if we close the golf course, if we had it open, I guess, we would be entitled to submit that as lost revenue, would we not?
Yeah, that would be my understanding, yes, because the reason the
Then why would we have it closed if we have potential to get that revenue back?
Can you repeat the question one more time? It's hard to hear.
I know, I hear somebody's water fountain drip. We have it closed. I mean, if it's open and we lose revenue because of it being open, we have a chance to get that revenue back. But what is being closed in, that's just a whitewash, especially, that's my question.
So just to be clear, are you asking?
We have a chance to get that revenue.
Are you asking, are we negatively
Why would it
impacting our chance of getting the lost revenue back by having the golf course closed?
Yes.
So my understanding would be, so we would make the argument that the reason the golf course is closed is because of COVID, because we have divided our general services staff into thirds and have them on a rotation where we're isolating them on a 2-week basis to protect them from potentially being exposed to COVID. That's why the golf course is closed. We needed those employees to be part of the rotation for sanitation and recycling and street sweeping. So we would make the argument that COVID caused the golf course to be closed. Absent COVID, the golf course would be open right now.
And so are we going to submit for those revenue losses?
Yeah, and I mean,
because we're losing revenue with it
we
being
would submit
closed.
for all. So, say that again.
Because we're losing that revenue. I mean, this is prime season, and the governor says golf courses can be open. And so if we're closed, we're losing that revenue. So then I would hope we would be submitting to get reimbursed that revenue back. Or does it have to be open? Go ahead.
Go ahead. I think there's a lag. It sounds like you're stopping and then you're so sorry.
Yeah, no problem.
Go ahead. Was there something else?
So the question would be, you submit for the revenue because it's closed, so it's lost revenue. So we were submitting for reimbursement of that revenue lost on the golf course with it being closed. That's the question.
Got it. We would include that as part of the 17.9 estimate that we would be impacted with the lost revenue. That would be included in that. Yes, we would submit for that. It's unclear what the process will be, whether it's we have to submit for it, whether we were just given an allocation. But if we're required to submit for it, we would submit the golf course lost revenue as part of that calculation, because that is how we are building the potential cuts as a result.
I believe Councilmember Hoey had his hand up.
Yes, thank you. I was wondering about, every year we ask the state for the 12.5 million. Do we have contingency plans those years if we didn't get the money, where we'd have to do the cuts? And is that something that we're looking at now? Because now we're talking about, it's not exactly 12, it's more, but is that, is that something that in the past we've prepared for? And my second question is that money safe? We were going to get 12 million this year. Is that 12 million safe?
I mean, as far as the 12 million, we don't know. I feel safer about the 19A money, especially since we received the first half. But 19A, I think, would fall right square into that category that the governor is talking about, 20% less grants, essentially grants and state money to municipalities. So I don't know. As far as scenarios, we're basically going through this scenario right now that we would have on the back burner in the past for, kind of the doomsday scenario. This is just another variation of it.
Yeah, and that's the other thing I want to add, and I know we brought this up with leadership. The cuts we're looking at right now could be much worse next year. So just please keep that in mind. Also, if we don't get the federal funding, we're really only trying to cut half a year's worth. It's really 7 months worth. So for lack of specific math, next year could be almost twice the impact you're seeing now, if not worse.
Are there any other questions? What I would love to do, so we have, because as you're aware, because of open meetings law, we have to schedule a meeting at least 10 days in advance. So we, our next caucus is Monday. I'm assuming that, and we could make caucus earlier on Monday if there's information then. But I would like to schedule another finance committee meeting, which would be in another 10 days, so we can have something to talk about. Does that sound like a common sense thing to do?
Yes, I think so.
Well, I was more asking David.
And there's no information like tonight?
I was going to ask, are you asking
Yeah,
colleagues?
because the information would have to come through you guys. So, we need a week and a half. We just got an A for open meetings, so we're not ruining our record on that one.
Congratulations on that, by the way.
Thank you.
I didn't know anyone was keeping score, but that's kind of cool. Just keep in mind that, so the 24th is a Sunday, the 25th is Memorial Day. Not that days really matter anymore. But yes, to answer your question, yes, I think that would make sense.
No picnics.
No picnics.
So, Michelle, tomorrow, can we work on scheduling a meeting as soon as we're able to for finance? I'll touch base with you about it tomorrow, but I'm sure the finance committee members that are still here, I'm sure people agree with that. We definitely,
if we get information, sure.
Yeah, and we also understand that the information is sensitive. It might not be easy to give us the information with a huge amount of time. I like to come well prepared, so I really like information well ahead of time. But we also understand this is more sensitive information. But please try to give us at least some time so that we are able to go through it and be prepared. Also, if you find that, that your plan changes, and I think this would be my request for anything, let us know. Things happen, but that does not mean that not sharing the information and surprising people with a completely different report is okay if you don't have to do that.
Understood. And again, we hoped that we had more information this evening, and I hear the frustration. I understand it, and I certainly appreciate it. And we'll be sure to keep that in mind moving forward. Our hope is that here pretty soon we'll be able to give you a complete picture. So we'll keep you posted on that.
If you're able to do it on Monday, we will, and I am speaking out of turn in the leadership, but I do feel confident that we're happy to start caucus earlier to accommodate that.
What time would that be on Monday?
I mean, I think we could probably start at 5.
5:30, yeah. 5:30.
When's your caucus start?
6:30.
It starts at 6:30, but it's only a half an hour. And we don't always start on time, but I do believe that it is, again, it's about respect, and the public is expecting our meeting to start at 7.
Mm-hmm.
And I like to be on time.
Okay. We'll keep that 5:30 time in mind as we work through the rest of the scenarios and move forward through the rest of the week.
And we're also understanding if there's only part of the information that you can give us, we would just love any information that we can get our hands on. And I personally will happily back you up. If you can say to me, I can give you this, but I can't give you anything else. We just want information, and we want to be able to do this in a transparent and equitable manner.
And I think certainly echo that. So totally understood, and I hear you, Jenny.
Well, can I get a motion to adjourn if there is nothing?
So moved.
So moved. Oh, wait, I can't do that.
Sorry, Darius, wrong elected office.
Dang, nabbit.
A second.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
I believe that is unanimous. Have a good night, everyone. And
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Have a good night, everybody. Stay safe.